For nearly 40 years, the world has held on to a specific memory of Rocky Dennis. To the public, he is the Hollywood saint, the boy born with a rare, disfiguring bone disorder who defied medical science, inspired a biker gang, and died peacefully in the arms of a mother who idolized him. The 1985 film Mask cemented this legacy. It was a story of light, perseverance, and the triumph of the human spirit. But legends are often just that, stories we tell ourselves to soften the blow of reality. Florence "Rusty" Dennis, Rocky's mother, allowed the world to believe the fairy tale for decades. It was a clean narrative. It was comforting. But as her own life neared its end, the silence became too heavy to carry. Before she died, Rusty began to dismantle the myth she helped create. She revealed that the life of the boy with the lion face was not a linear journey of inspiration. It was a chaotic, jagged existence defined by negligence, drug abuse, and a death that bore no resemblance to the cinematic finale. This is the story of the real Rocky Dennis, not the icon, but the boy buried beneath the mask. Roy L.W. Rocky Dennis was born on December 4, 1961, in California. By all metrics, he was a standard, healthy newborn. 7 pounds, clear lungs, no visible deformities. For the first 2 years of his life, his mother, Rusty, raised him with the assumption of normalcy. But biology is often writing a script that we cannot see until it is too late. At 30 months old, the illusion shattered. Rocky began suffering from a relentless cycle of ear infections, sinus pressure, and sore throats. Rusty took him to UCLA Medical Center for which she assumed was a routine tonsillectomy. During the prep, a technician noticed an irregularity on a standard skull X-ray. They expanded the imaging field. What they found in the developing bones of a 2-year-old boy baffled the leading specialists of the era. The diagnosis was craniodiaphyseal dysplasia, an ultra-rare sclerosing bone disorder. In the 1960s, physicians colloquially and cruelly referred to it as lionitis. The pathology was terrifyingly simple. Rocky's body lacked the mechanism to reabsorb old bone tissue. Instead of recycling calcium, his body simply piled it on. Layer upon layer of calcium deposits were accumulating on his skull. The X-rays revealed a grim future. As the bone thickened, it would not just distort his facial features outward, it would grow inward. The foramina, the small holes in the skull that allow nerves and blood vessels to pass through, would slowly be crushed by the encroaching bone. The doctors at UCLA delivered a prognosis that was less a diagnosis than more a sentencing. They told Rusty that the pressure would blind him, it would deafen him. Eventually, the weight of his own skull would compress his brain, ending his life. They gave him 4 years. They told her to enjoy him now, because Rocky Dennis would not live to see his 7th birthday. But medicine relies on averages, and Rocky was an outlier. The doctors were right about the mechanics of the disease, but they were wrong about the timeline. Rocky did not die at 7. However, his survival required a different kind of warfare. As the dysplasia advanced, Rocky's face was pushed into the recognizable shape that would later make him famous. The bridge of his nose widened, his eyes were pushed to the sides of his head, and his chin protruded. By the time he was school-aged, he was visually striking in a way that society usually rejects. The school district attempted to segregate him. They argued that his appearance would traumatize other students, urging Rusty to place him in special education programs for the mentally disabled. But Rocky's mind was untouched by the calcium deposits. His IQ was high, his wit sharp. Rusty, a woman of immense friction and defiance, threatened legal action and forced the school's hand. Rocky entered the 1st grade. He was stared at, he was mocked, but he possessed a psychological resilience that seemed to outpace his physical frailty. He didn't just endure the classroom, he commanded it. He developed a disarming charisma, using humor to preemptively strike against bullies. There is a famous anecdote, often sanitized in the film, that captures his reality. Halloween was Rocky's sanctuary. It was the one night a year where the grotesque was celebrated. He would lead a group of children through the neighborhood wearing a rubber mask. When neighbors opened the door, he would rip the mask off to reveal his actual face. The neighbors, thinking it was another layer of makeup, would laugh and applaud. Rocky learned early that if he controlled the joke couldn't hurt him. By his teenage years, he was an honor student. He was deeply embedded in the counterculture of the 70s, plastering his walls with Bruce Springsteen posters. He found solace in the lyrics of Born to Run, anthems about breaking out of traps and defying destiny. For a brief window, Rocky Dennis was not a medical tragedy. He was just a teenager dealing with a bad hand. But while Rocky was fighting for a normal life, his home life was descending into chaos. This is where the Hollywood narrative begins to fracture. In the film Mask, Rusty Dennis, played by Cher, is portrayed as a tough-love matriarch, eccentric perhaps, a bit wild, but fundamentally a stable force of protection. The reality was far more volatile. Rusty Dennis loved her son ferociously, that is undisputed. But she was also deeply entrenched in a dangerous subculture. Their home in Azusa, California, was a revolving door for the outcasts of the 1970s biker scene. It wasn't just leather jackets and motorcycles, it was amphetamines, addiction, and instability. Rocky didn't grow up in a quirky, bohemian home. He grew up in a trap house. The air was thick with marijuana smoke and the chemical tang of harder substances. Rocky, whose health depended on stability, was often surrounded by adults who were high, unpredictable, or running from the law. Rusty herself battled severe drug addiction during Rocky's most critical years. The movie implies she cleaned up for him. The truth suggests she struggled to function at all. There were brushes with Child Protective Services. There were times when Rocky, the child with the fatal disability, had to be the adult in the room. He learned to navigate his mother's highs and lows with the same precision he used to navigate his failing vision. The film also erased a crucial element of his support system, his older half-brother Joshua. Joshua was a stabilizing anchor in Rocky's life, a key figure who died of AIDS years later. Hollywood cut him out entirely to focus the drama solely on the mother-son bond. This erasure isolated Rocky in the public imagination, making him seem like a lone satellite orbiting his mother. In reality, he was part of a fractured, crowded, and chaotic family unit, trying to survive on the fringes of society.
By 1978, the reprieve was over. Rocky was 16 years old, 9 years past his expiration date. But the biology of cranial diaphyseal dysplasia is relentless. The headaches began to change. They weren't just pain anymore. They were pressure events, suggesting the bone was finally compressing the brainstem. His energy, once boundless enough to keep up with Springsteen concerts, evaporated. He became withdrawn. The boy who loved to make people laugh stopped smiling. His eyesight, which he had fought so hard to maintain, began to fail completely. The bone was closing the optical channels. Rocky was going blind. He knew he was dying. There is a specific cruelty to this disorder. The mind remains perfectly sharp while the body slowly creates its own prison. Rocky was fully aware that the walls were closing in. The climax of the film Mask is a tearjerker. It depicts Rocky dying peacefully in his sleep, followed by a scene where Rusty finds him, weeps over his body, and finds closure in the moments immediately following his passing. It is a scene of warmth and connection. The reality of October 4, 1978 was cold, quiet, and lonely. On the night of his death, Rusty was not there. She wasn't holding his hand. She wasn't in the next room. According to later accounts and her own admissions, the instability of her lifestyle had pulled her away from the home. Rocky Dennis died alone in his room. When Rusty received the news, it didn't come from walking into his bedroom. It came via a phone call. The shock was absolute, but it was compounded by the guilt of absence. The Hollywood version gave the audience a moment of maternal sacrifice. The true story left a mother with a lifetime of regret, knowing that in the moment her son finally succumbed to the darkness he had fought for 16 years, she was nowhere to be found. The divergence between myth and reality continued even after his heart stopped. In the movie, Rocky is buried. There is a funeral. His friends leave baseball cards and flowers on his grave. It is a traditional ceremonial goodbye that allows the audience to process their grief. In reality, there is no grave for Rocky Dennis. Rusty, perhaps driven by a desire for his suffering to mean something, or perhaps driven by financial or logistical necessity, did not bury him. Instead, Rocky's body was donated to the UCLA Medical Center. The doctors who had studied him in life continued to study him in death. His skull, the very thing that killed him, became a vital specimen for radiological and pathological study. His skeleton was preserved, analyzed, and kept in the archives of medical science. This is a complicated legacy. On one hand, Rocky's contribution to science is undeniable. His remains have helped train generations of doctors to identify and understand skeletal dysplasias. His suffering provided data that may have eased the pain of others. But on a human level, it strips away the romance of the story. There is no headstone to visit. There is no place for pilgrims of the Rocky Dennis myth to leave flowers. His physical form didn't return to the earth. It went into a sterile storage facility, cataloged as a medical anomaly. When Florence "Rusty" Dennis finally broke her silence in her later years, she did it not to tarnish his memory. She did it because the weight of the mask had become too heavy. She wanted the world to know that the movie, while beautiful, was a fantasy. It was a story written for people who needed to believe that love conquers all. But love did not cure Rocky's bone density. Love did not clean up the drug addiction in the living room. And love did not keep Rocky from dying alone in the dark. The truth is sharper, jagged, and uncomfortable. Rocky Dennis was not a saint. He was a teenager who liked rock and roll, hated his headaches, and navigated a home life that would have broken most adults. Does knowing the truth diminish him? Perhaps the sanitized Hollywood version is easier to watch, but the reality that a boy lived 16 years in a body that was crushing him in a house that was chaotic without the promise of a happy ending and still managed to laugh? That is not inspiration. That is defiance. The movie gave us a hero we could admire. The truth gives us a human being we can grieve. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into the reality behind the legend compelling, please subscribe and join us for the next investigation.